Oh, goody.
Alright, what's going on everybody? Zombies here again, and today we're back with another Marvel Snap video. So in this one we are taking a look at the best decks for all different pools for the upcoming hot location, which is Baxter Building. This one reads, whoever is winning this location gets +3 power at the other locations. So this is definitely one of those ones where you're going to be fighting down for the Baxter Building more often than not with your opponents, as it gives you a little bit of an advantage in the other lanes. So let's take a look at the decks I have for this location. First up, we have our Pool 1 deck. This is one that I think is going to do rather well with the location, and unsurprisingly, like a lot of Pool 1 decks, it is an Odin deck. Zoo's also really good in Pool 1, but I do think if you are fighting for this one single location, the Odin deck definitely has some advantages to it. Gamora, definitely one of those. 12 power for 5 cost is really good if you know what lane they're going into. You can also double it with Odin. Same kind of thing with White Tiger, just good power for cost and can double it up for a lot more power on the final turn. Not a lot of amazing 4-drops in Pool 1, and we aren't overly reliant on 1-drops with this deck, so we're not running Khazar. We are running Jessica Jones, but she seems pretty solid overall. Ironheart for more on reveal value. Scarlet Witch to help us get rid of bad locations. Star-Lord just because good power for cost, and we can get it again with Odin potentially. Mr. Sinister just helps us get some locations filled up a little bit. Angela, still really good card that benefits from playing other cards. And then just some 1-drops here. Rocket Raccoon, Nightcrawler, and Ant-Man. Just some of the best 1-drops available. So pretty decent deck overall, I would say. I think this one should do a pretty good job. Next up, for pool number 2 here, we're going to have a Storm deck. I think she's one of the more powerful cards you get access to in pool number 2. And she pairs very nicely with Jessica Jones here, as we're not going to play in the flooded lane anyways. So that's one of the best kind of combos you can do with Storm in pool 2. Other than that, we just have good cards that synergize well. Sunspot's a really good 1-drop, especially if you're able to drop it in a Storm lane. Nightcrawler is still good, especially with Angela. Armor, because now a lot of people run Killmonger once you get into pool 2, so you want to protect your 1-drops as well as your big stuff. Then we kind of have a big stuff package of our own, so we have Jubilee to cheat something big into play. We have a few big options for that. Infinite obviously being the biggest, and has synergy with our Sunspot. Hulk, because we just wanted another big option to rip off the Jubilee. Chavez makes our deck more consistent and has a higher probability of getting pulled by the Jubilee, since she's pretty much always in our deck until turn 6. And then Vision, because I think he's good with Storm and is just a very high value pull that can make it difficult for your opponent to really figure out what 2 lanes you're trying to win at the end of the game. So I think Storm is a great option for pool 2. Let's take a look at our other pool 2 deck here though. Next up here, unsurprisingly, is our Devil Dinosaur deck. So Devil Dinosaur, one of the best decks you can use in pool 2, and still packs a punch even when you make it into pool 3. For this one, we are utilizing just a pretty standard Devil Dino deck here. We have Moon Girl to keep our hand nice and big and sometimes give us second dinosaur to play on 6. White Queen is great at taking the opponent's win condition and giving you information, which is awesome. We have Cosmo to protect us from things like Shang-Chi and Enchantress. That's very nice. Armor for some more protection there for our 1-drops and our dinosaur. Agent 13 keeps cards in our hand. Nightcrawler, still very versatile and pairs well with Angela. Collector appreciates the cards we're adding to our hand. Abel gives us one of their cards, keeps the hand big, so pretty standard stuff. And Lizard and Sentinel are just pretty good value overall. So pretty standard deck here, but I think it should do a pretty good job at the hot location. Looking at some pool 3 decks here, we have Thor Lockjaw. Played this one on stream the other night and did pretty well. I think this is one that should do pretty well into the current hot location. is really about getting your big stuff into play with either Lockjaw or Jubilee to cheat them out early. We have a lot of big stuff that can come into play. Half of our deck is 5 or more cost. Infinite, obviously the biggest thing we can be doing here. Chavez for the consistency. Odin has nice synergy with other things as well as Jubilee. Doom lets us play for multiple lanes. Jane draws our 0 cost stuff, so our Hammer and our Wasp. And Vision's a really nice cheat out target because it lets us play something else into the Lockjaw lane. Lockjaw, definite star of the deck, letting us cheat out a bunch of this big stuff before we should be able to. Then we need some cheap stuff to drop into it, so Thor gives us a Hammer to do that, which is really nice, and just becomes pretty powerful on his own once we get that Hammer into play. Then we have our cheap stuff, so we have our Wasp, we have our Iceman, and we have our Okoye. This is the part of the deck that's very flexible, especially the Okoye slot. You could run a Scorpion, you could run a Sunspot. The big thing is you want basically 3 cheap cards to toss into this Lockjaw. Wasp is kind of nice because we get it off of our Jane, even if we don't have a Hammer, which is kind of cool, and then we can just throw it away. It's also really nice because we can just play Lockjaw on 3 into a Wasp, and usually our chance of getting something big will be pretty decent. So I really like this deck. I think it is a really solid choice if you have the cards for it. Next up here we have a Silver Surfer deck. So figured we would do one for this card since he is kind of all the rage right now after joining the game recently in the season pass, and he's just a very powerful good card in decks that care about 3 cost stuff. And that's exactly what this deck does. So we have basically almost all 3 costs. The only not 3 cost here, we have Domino, so we have something to play on turn 2, which is pretty nice. Wong, so we can get double Surfer triggers, and then we have Sarah, which will enable us to play 3 3-cost things on the final turn. So all very powerful effects there. Other than that, just a bunch of good 3-drops here. Obviously the Surfer to buff him up. Brood has become insane with the Surfer since it gives you 3 3-cost bodies. Storm is nice because we can lock down a lane and then Surfer boost it later. Captain America's just solid ongoing stats. Cosmo helps shut down opposing stuff. We have to be a bit careful though about not getting it in our Surfer lane. Juggernaut can push him out of the final lane or your Storm lane, which is sweet. Killmonger to deal with any pesky 1-drops. Polaris can move around their stuff to kind of lock them out or make their plays a bit unoptimal. Also really good power for the cost. Maximus, best power for the cost. Big downside, but we can mitigate that downside by playing into the Cosmo lane, or we can just play him on the final turn when giving them cards usually does not matter. Another deck I think will be really good for this location is Disrupt Wave. So this deck really powerful, hasn't changed a whole lot, just the general good destroy synergies with things like Death, and then being able to use Wave to get down Death, and things like Arrow or Leader in the same turn is usually really hard for the opponent to deal with. Now we do have a She-Hulk in here, but this is a very replaceable card and the list still works really well. But if you do have She-Hulk, I think she does add quite a bit to the list. However, if you are missing She-Hulk, you could put Nova back in, as we did not have the space for them in this list, and they're obviously a very good inclusion that has natural synergy with our cheap cards and our Death and all that kind of stuff. Another thing you could consider as a possible inclusion is Magneto over She-Hulk, or even Leader if you don't have him. But if you do have Leader, I would run Leader in this deck because I think he is really good for what this deck tries to do. But yeah, general pretty standard disrupt wave kind of style here. Arrow really pulls a lot of the weight of the deck, and just being able to get down that cheap Death or that cheap She-Hulk is very powerful, and I think it's going to be very good in a location that's all about kind of trying to win one main location and then put a bit of power in one more. A look beyond pool 3 here, we have a Shuri Red Skull deck. This is one I played on stream the other night, made a few tweaks to. I think it's actually a pretty solid deck overall. Game plan here is we are trying to make use of Shuri to double one of our powerful turn 5 plays. We have quite a nice variety of options here, but mainly Red Skull is the big one we're trying to hit. However, Vision is also a good target, as well as Gamora. And then on the final turn, we can Taskmaster to copy whatever our big thing is, whether that be a 30 power Red Skull or a 14 power Vision, or even a just a big buff Gamora. Alternatively, we have Storm to help lock down a lane, and Jessica to help keep that lane closed. Just some good value, cheap stuff here with Sunspot, who's great in the Storm lane. Daredevil helps guarantee we're making the right decision on turn 5. Armor to protect our big stuff. Lizard because he can almost just shut down a lane on his own if the opponent doesn't have a bunch of cards to play. Cosmo also protects our stuff and shuts off other decks. And then pretty straightforward. It's a really cool deck. I honestly think it is kind of an underrated deck right now because the pool 5 cards are hard to get. But if you happen to get Shuri, I do think this is a pretty sweet way to make use of her. The 30 power Red Skull is it's a lot to deal with. The last deck we're taking a look at here is a Mr. Negative Bast Surfer deck. So really strong deck. This is another one where if you do not have our only pool 5 card here, Bast, it is replaceable and the deck will still run very well. But Bast is an incredible card, just making all of our cheap stuff with low power just really good for cost. You might notice we have pretty much every card in this deck benefits from Bast significantly, except for Sarah, who gets ever so slightly smaller. But other than that, we have what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We have 10 cards. 10 cards. So literally, other than Sarah, every card in our deck benefits from this effect, which is crazy. And it's particularly good with things like Iron Man or Mystique copying the Iron Man. So that way they're boosting their own power as well, which is pretty sweet. Negative's just really good right now. I do think he is one of the stronger decks. Now, if you don't have Bast, I do think you could put in just another card that is good off of the negative flip. Maybe another 3 cost, so that way you have more stuff for your Surfer to boost up. Because Surfer is really crazy in negative, not only putting 3 power on the board, but buffing all your other 3s for free. Just anytime we get a good 0, it's going to be really strong in these negative decks. You could consider Wong potentially. There's honestly a variety of options you could consider. You could consider like Absorbing Man. They're just a bunch you could consider, but overall, this is the list I am most happy with, and I think it just has a lot of flexibility to it, and I think it should be pretty good at winning one location and then showing up the other one with your cheap stuff, or just surprising them with a bunch of free cards on the final turn. But that is going to wrap it up for this video. Let me know in the comments below if there's any deck that you are planning on trying or having success with for this hot location. As usual, this will be lasting 24 hours and then it will be going back to the normal random rate. But for the next day, it is going to be at a 60% appearance rate for Baxter Building. But that's going to wrap it up for this video. If you enjoyed it, remember to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.